Welcome back. 365 Sports. Grayson Grundhoefer. Grayson, you were at practice earlier this week, and yesterday we heard from the quarterbacks. What have been your thoughts, particularly from what we heard from Coach Aranda the other day, and then the quarterbacks here yesterday?
I think, kind of the general consensus is I think that there's a program that is trying to go away from what happened a year ago. And I think Dave Aranda kind of spoke to that a little bit, just kind of self-reflecting, which is something that I think he's done quite a bit during his time at Baylor, to be honest, because he's kind of had some roller coaster, from COVID to winning a baseball championship to last year. It's just kind of been ups and downs and having to make adjustments. And I think just self-reflecting. And so you heard that from him. Blake Shapen talked about it as well, just kind of looking back on what he did last year, how he can grow from that. He specifically mentioned the leadership part, which is something that I think was glaringly, it was obvious last year, right? Because they didn't have as many leaders as I think everyone thought. And at least that leadership didn't quite all come together enough to where they could right the ship and keep everything together. And so you look to your quarterback for that. And so Blake Shapen kind of, I think, has taken that as a challenge. Obviously, Sawyer Robertson is new to Baylor, but still comes in with quite a bit of experience. And I'm sure he's looking to step right in and become a leader of his own. And then Sean Bell, just good to hear from Sean. I think he mentioned a lot of things about the quarterback battle that were, I guess, interesting. But in general, he's just allowing these guys to go out there and compete and allowing them to get better. And honestly, just try to improve the position from a year ago, because it really had a lot of ups and downs last season, and in large part because of Blake Shapen's inconsistent play, but also because things got magnified because the defense just wasn't as good as it had been in the year previous.
I think you're a believer that Robertson will be the starter at some point early next year. Was that only reinforced when you hear how Aranda and Bell are just kind of gushing over the guy and what he's already brought, given that he's been on campus basically, 2 months at this point?
Right. I kind of just think when you look at Shapen and Robertson, my viewpoint is that Robertson has the higher ceiling. I just think when you look at him, you go, okay, this is the guy who could play in the NFL. This is the guy that has the NFL arm talent. His delivery looks great. He's athletic enough and mobile enough to get outside the pocket and make throws downfield, and just more so what the NFL is looking for. And we talked about on, the Bearcats this week, Craig, I still think that Blake Shapen is the favorite to be the starter game one. But in general, I just think this offense has a higher ceiling with someone like Sawyer Robertson at quarterback. So now it really just comes down to, can Robertson make this his team? And can he get a grasp of the offense quick enough? Because remember, he's coming from an air raid offense. He mentioned this week how it is different and there are adjustments that he's trying to make. And so how quickly can he get caught up on all of those things, I think will probably be the biggest difference maker in who ends up being the quarterback next season.
Grayson, there are a lot of other position battles that we're, haven't even gotten into yet. I mean, I think we know who the center is going to be. That's probably going to be Clark Barrington, who you'll hear from later in the show today in the interview I did with him a little while ago before spring ball started. But outside of that, we don't know who the right tackle necessarily going to be, or the left guard, or, there's a lot out there on this offense that does not center around the quarterback.
There is. And I mean, even Clark Barrington, when he initially signed with Baylor, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that he was going to play center. I kind of felt like he was either going to play center or they were going to have to bring in someone else to play center, because Clark can do both. But my thought process was it was hard for me to envision the staff, starting Timothy Dawn as a redshirt freshman at center. And so it makes a lot of sense that Clark is playing that position. They have more guys who are ready to play guard than they do center. So unless they're able to add someone from the transfer portal, I think you're exactly right. Clark will be the starting center probably next year. You got Campbell, who's going to start at left tackle. And then I think Gavin Byers fits in somewhere in there. I think he's probably going to play guard this year. But those are the three guys that I sit back and say, okay, I think those three guys are, in my eyes, kind of locked in to be starters. They're veterans. They're experienced. They've had the ups and downs of college. I think they're the most ready to play. But then the other positions, you're exactly right. Who's going to start at, right tackle? Is Elijah Ellis, finally, his 5th year on campus, going to take this big step and become a starter at right tackle? Or, someone who is kind of a hidden gem in his recruiting class, Caden Siraki, is he going to take over that right tackle position? And then, of course, the guard spot, like you said, up in the air. I think a guy like Tate Williams is a really intriguing one. Maybe even George Maye as well, potentially sliding into the guard spot. But you're right, a lot of questions along the offensive line, and that's just the offensive line, because I think if you look at wide receiver as well, there's still some question marks there, even though I think most people can kind of guess who the starters will be. I still think there's a lot of talent in that room and a lot of competition still going on.
I think we mentioned it on the podcast, but you had taken note of the new roster that was released, and I think we kind of talked about it towards the end, but was there anything that jumped out to you for those that may have missed that and are interested, that jumped out from, the departures on the roster?
Right. So the departure side of things, obviously people had been waiting for a while to figure out if Tay McWilliams was going to be able to come back to Baylor. And obviously last year was just it was just sad to see him get injured so early in the season and then just be unable to get himself back onto the field. And now he's moving on. So I felt really, that one is really tough, because I felt like he was going to have a really good year last year. And I felt like he was a really, really talented running back who, unfortunately, injuries happen. So that was one. Javon Gibson not being on the roster was another one that was a little surprising, along with Bryce Simpson, 2 younger guys who I think we're still kind of waiting to see what they could be. I don't think they were going to have huge impacts this year, but I think down the road as developmental guys, those were 2 guys that I really felt like could be pretty good players down the road for the Bears. So as far as attrition goes, I think those were the main ones that I kind of keyed in on. There were a couple others, Jalen Ellis, Cisco Castan. But I think the ones that I mentioned are probably the 2 that I guess raised my eyebrows up the most.
Yeah, Grayson, what do you think? And again, we haven't heard from that side of the ball yet, but about the adjustments under Matt Powledge on defense and how different that will be.
Right, and that's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch. And a big reason for it is because he coaches the safeties, obviously, and defensive backs in general are going to, get his attention a lot. He's got a lot of young guys right now that are competing for playing time. One of his, I guess you'd call veterans, in Devin Lemire, who's only a redshirt sophomore, but he was the only returning starter from the safety position. And he's out for the spring pretty much. He's just going to be going through individual drills and, helping in those ways. But as far as, the physicality, the team portion, he's going to be relying on guys who haven't played a ton. So I think that's going to be very interesting to watch when you see guys like Corey Gordon out there and Alfonso Allen, who played a little bit last year, A.J. McCarty, who made the move from cornerback to safety, and then Devin Bobby, who played some last year. Those are the 4 that I'm really looking at the safety position to see how they grow and develop. And, of course, Bryson Jackson as well, who's now playing the star position. So a lot of moving parts, honestly, for Matthew Powledge in the secondary. The defense in general, if you look up front, I think their defense line is going to be really good. I know there's concerns there depth-wise, but when you have guys like T.J. Franklin, Gabe Hall, and Jackie Marshall inside your 2 deep, you got to be feeling pretty good about the talent you have there. And then at linebacker, they brought in Mike Smith, the linebacker from Liberty. You have Garmin Randolph, who's been starting at Jack for a long time. You have Matt Jones, who's been, again, a big part of Baylor's defense for a while now. So at least you have some veteran leadership there for him to rely on and really help grow some of the younger parts of this defense. But in general, I think this is a unit that's due for a big bounce back after what was a really tough 2022 season.
So spring's underway. They've got the pro day coming up on Monday. That's not really a recruit thing, though. That's not even going to be on campus. But spring game, a month from now, obviously there will be some visits and things like that over the next few weeks. Right now, they have 3 commits for 24 with Jaden Porter from Lorena and Brock Jackson from Lumberton and then Colton Siraki from the Woodlands. But what can you kind of I guess, throw out there as far as what people can expect recruiting-wise here now that, the ball's rolled back out on the field and things are a bit freer? Like, what's kind of the timeline? What are we looking at as far as building on this 24 class?
So the biggest thing right now is the visits, right? So they're going to have visitors throughout spring football because guys want to come and see practice. They want to meet players, and they want to see how the coaches actually coach during a real practice. All of those things, they really do add up for recruits, and it allows them to kind of get a peek behind the curtain of, hey, if I went to Baylor, what would my experience be like? How does this guy coach? Does this fit what I'm looking for? So all of that is really, really important. Obviously, they'll get to take campus tours as well and get to know the coaching staff. But in general, that practice portion of the visit is really key during the spring. And it all leads up to the spring game, which is going to be a big, big time for the Baylor staff to get recruits on campus. That's going to be their biggest day as far as having a mass amount of recruits on campus. It's going to be for that spring game. So right now, it's more so about getting as many guys on campus as possible, whether it's 2025, 2026, 2024. They're really just trying to get a bunch of recruits on campus, guys that they're looking at, guys they're evaluating, guys who already have offers, and then figuring out where those guys fit into their plans long-term, and also allowing the recruits to figure out if Baylor is a part of their plans in their recruitment. So it's a key time for the Baylor staff and for all these recruits. But right now, it's, again, a similar situation for the Baylor staff. They're trying to figure out what to do with their remaining spots in the 2024 class. They still need to figure out the quarterback position, which is obviously something that's going to be talked about for months because still trying to figure that out. That's a big deal of a position. And then they're also just trying to figure out, hey, okay, so originally we thought it'd be like 15, 16 guys in this class, but with the attrition, is this going to allow us to expand the 2024 class, or will those spots be used from the transfer portal after spring football? So it's also kind of trying to balance that as well while not taking too many commitments too early without knowing for sure how many spots you have. So I think in general, that's kind of a summary of what's going on right now. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of things I think the Baylor staff still has to figure out. But in general, it's a very, very important time for recruits and for the Baylor staff to figure out where they need to be going forward into the summer.
Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com. Grayson, have a great weekend. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Right. Grayson Grundhoefer, Sic'Em365.com. Read his work there on the website and see everything that he does. And, of course, the Bearcast, which is live on Tuesdays and then